I would like to thank the OECD colleagues as well for providing this report. Some of the recommendations are already debated in the Finnish society, and I think that some of the recommendations are so-called hot potatoes for the Finnish society. So there will be great debate. Thanks for fueling our debate and by providing, I think, justified criticism. Now, my background is in youth research, so here's my short commentary on the report as a youth researcher. And I just mentioned briefly that there's a lot of debate on the OECD agenda and the OECD way of doing comparative studies, but I won't go into these details. There's a lot of important stuff in this report, and a lot of the recommendations I can share. Now, Tanja Kirjavainen already pointed out that one of the most striking things, I think, about this report is that there are recurring mentions that they don't really have a data on how to evaluate if our investments if they provide good results. And if you look at youth services, even the long-term youth projects, we lack long-term evaluations, and they don't really know about the real impact of those projects. And that's clearly a challenge for Finnish society. It's a challenge for policy making, but I think it's also a challenge for the Finnish research community. And it digs really deep into, I think, science policy in Finland, how we finance science. Do our financing instruments, do they guarantee that they can actually do long-term evaluations? And it also concerns policy making, I guess, in Finnish society. Is our attention span long enough? Are we really willing, I mean politically, to look at long-term effects? Not only 4 years, the government term in Finland lasts 4 years, but in 6 years, 8 years, and so forth. So the criticism that this report provides, I think it's certainly justified. And for the Finnish youth research community, I think this is clearly a challenge. And Tanja Kirjavainen pointed well out that it's a challenge for policymakers, it's a challenge for administration, but also for the scientific community. And I think the report really clearly points out that we need to integrate services for the young people more. And the way I read it myself was that we need to have integrated services if we want to answer the complex realities of young people and the situations they are facing. So there clearly is a need for horizontal youth policy, which unites different topics, such as employment policy, social policy, youth policy, educational policy, and also urban planning. Now, I will show you one result of our studies of young people born in Finland in '97. So this study covers the whole age cohort, just to show how complex these issues are and why we need horizontal policy. Now, there's a correlation between median income of the region where the young children and young people are growing up and their grade point average in basic education. And this was published in our study on young people born in 97 in Finland. Now, the red line above shows those young people who get grades from 9 to 10 in their basic education, and then 8 to 9, 7 to 8, and so forth. And this point here is the period when they were 3 years old. And you can see that those young people who got the best grades when they were 16 lived in the richer regions when they were 3 years old. And those who got the lowest degrees lived in the poorer regions. And then the family then the kids started growing up, the family income rose, and there was a bit of delay in 2008 and 2009 with the economic recession. But as you can see, there are no single exceptions here, except in those cases where we simply lack the data. So it shows that parental income still influences how well the young people are able to do in school, and that in turn influences their choices, their transitions to school, and later on to work, and so on and so on. So we need to combine different perspectives in order to be able to meet these challenges. So this is just to point out that perhaps we need to have a lifespan perspective as well. So a couple of sort of thoughts and reflections based on the report. Now, you didn't really talk about gender differences, but there are considerable gender differences in the employment rate, in the need rate of young people. And I will just share you some of the recent results we were able to finalize a couple of weeks ago. Now we look at young people who were born in '87 in Finland, and they examined 45,000 of them. And in 2010, 13% of the boys, they're only with basic education, and 9.4% of the girls. And we had succeeded, in the last 5 years, we had succeeded, I think, rather well in helping them getting education. And in 2015, 9.2% of the boys were with only basic education, and 5.8% of the girls. And so this points out for two things. Firstly, we have done something right. We are able to, help young people to get education, even after they are 25 years old. But the gender differences are still considerable. So perhaps we need to think about the gender-sensitive solution to these problems. And these reports point out, I think, rather justifiably to the need to increase digital services, especially for the young people living in rural areas. And one of the questions I think that we really should be asking in Finland is that we have talked about digital services for 20 years, and our technological level in the society is rather high. But still, digital improvements in education, in employment services, in social services, perhaps also in the youth services, is sort of lagging behind. And we perhaps need to discuss why this is so. What is there in the practice architectures, in the daily constitution of the work that sort of prevents digital services from improving? Also, as a researcher of youth work, I sort of felt that maybe there could have been more about youth work. Youth work was mentioned when you were talking about ohjaamos. As a youth researcher, we talk a lot about peer activities of the young, and one of the solutions offered in the report was peer counseling in career counselors. And the sort of obvious continuing question is there a room for other sorts of peer support systems to reduce the number of needs? And I think there are some things here that we don't know yet, but we will soon find out. One of the things that we were able to do only a couple of weeks ago with my colleagues from the health department, we find out that there's a causation between social participation and inclusion in schools and the need rate. And this is especially high for the boys. So we need to take into account the peer questions inside the education as well. And the last point perhaps is the concept of need itself. It's a static concept. At the moment, you're either need or you're not. So it's a dichotomic concept. But at the same time, it's a dynamic concept as well. So then you go to education or you get work. You are no longer a need. And I think we have fairly well pointed out that it's really important to support young people who are in vocational education and inside the education as well. And this, I think, goes to the heart of the Finnish society and Finnish social policy. Is the answer to these problems, is it some sort of universal services and universalism provided for all the young people? Or is it just targeted services provided for those young people who are identified as being at risk? Or is it really a combination of both things? So I guess what I wanted to show is that this report provides a lot of food for thought, which we need to answer based on the Finnish realities and the tradition of Finnish social and youth and educational policy. So thank you once again.